Well, Lenny, I want to come back to something you said about family, marriage and family earlier, because maybe this is sort of also, I mean, thinking out into the future. So you made the point how, okay, the state usurps these functions of the church that the church was much more, not just more efficient at, but that the church, given the revelation that it protects and propagates, right? The revelation of God, that it's custodians of, right? The church is the custodian of revelation, not the state. So not only is it going to be more efficient in doing social justice, although it may need the state to do social justice, it has to be informing the state minimally on what social justice even is. But, maybe here's like a future, it's almost imminent, is the problem of the birth rate and the coming very real possibility of something like mass, I say extinction. What's the term that's being used? But like massive population problems.
Mass contraction.
Because with the population depression, you have untold economic hardships that follow from that.
It's going to be, I was on X today, and Elon Musk was sharing some tweets by a population expert. And, there was like 2 countries that he referenced that were in the green. Everybody else is in the yellow or red, which means either those ethnic groups will literally in around 2050, they will no longer be able to recover. It'll be inevitable that they will die out as ethnic groups at 2050, and by 2200, which really isn't that far away. I mean, he's expecting something like a massive extinction of people groups that will have incredible ramifications. We can't even put our minds around it.
Let's talk about a couple right now.
Let me finish this thought, though. Because we're talking again, the outsourcing of the church. So Logan was making this point that if the church isn't doing something, then people will look to some other entity to do that thing, right? If the church isn't dispensing justice, then you're going to look towards the Nazis or whatever, or the state or some kind of ideology to do that which the church is not doing, right? And here you have a very clear example. What are the birth rates within Christian countries that claim to be Christian? What are the birth rates within the church, within people who attend church? And the reality is they're incredibly low. These church-going Christians are not having families. They're not having they're not having families in the sense of not just reproducing, but also propagating the human species, right? Which is part of the cultural mandate in Genesis 1. So what potentially might happen, well, now the state has to come in and start. And this happened I have a book by a Harvard sociologist by the name of Carl Zimmerman. He was writing in the 30s and 40s. And Lenny, who is that? The similar sociologist, he had a Russian name. You mentioned it before. It's not coming to me right now.
Soren Pirkin.
Pirkin made a similar observation. And when the Romans got very successful, right? When the Roman Empire really increased and the culture started to degrade, okay, and families people were no longer having children. There was a child crisis in ancient Rome, and what happened is Augustus and the Caesars after him had to come in and sort of through the power of the state, now the totalitarian power of the state, enforce child bearing and child rearing. Right now, we could only imagine what that might look like. I mean, in a modern context, but if like the church can't even have kids, can't even have families with and people in the church, Christians, carrying out the cultural mandate. Do you really want the state to come in and start enforcing or playing that role of enforcing childbearing and child rearing? So anyways.
Well, it's happening. And let me tell you, this won't take too long. And I've talked with guys like for example, Tim Carney of the American Enterprise Institute. Also, Brad Wilcox out of the University of Virginia Institute for Family Studies has done this. And I've looked into this issue. And here's what we're going to look at. In 30 years, you will see the fallout in this country, because what happens is, and I think we've discussed here before how the 30-somethings and 40-somethings are, they maybe want one child, or they don't want to be childless, right? We had the podcast, and you can link to that, where the young women were wanting to be childless. And what happens is, yes, you go on your vacations now, and yes, you're free to spend your money on your souped up vehicle or your lavish home or things like that. When you're 65 and your health issues start kicking in, you're not going to want to travel. You're not going to be going around the world. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to be able to go to the grocery store. But there's fewer people in that next generation who are taking the jobs. There are fewer people to be doctors, which means doctors' lines get longer and your health issues aren't treated as well. There are fewer people to support the economy, so that more people need to be taxed more heavily, or your Social Security may dry up because Social Security now isn't being fed into at the same rate it was when populations were growing. You die alone, lonely. We saw this with COVID. How many times did you read that a lady was found, she had frozen to death or what have you, and nobody knew it for 4 or 5 weeks because COVID had isolated everybody? When you don't have family, you isolate yourself. And that's why I'm saying in 30 to 40 years, we are going to see this fallout come out hugely, and it's going to affect all aspects of our society. It's going to be economically a huge detriment. It's going to be psychologically a huge detriment, and people just don't realize that a little bit of selfishness now is going to create huge problems later on. And you're right, they're going to look to the state to say, what are you guys doing? And all the state can do is say, well, we'll just take over more of your life. And you don't want to be alone. We have to move you into a group home. You don't get that choice anymore.
Well, and I don't want to be too dark about this, but think of animal husbandry. What do you need to do? Right? You need to get some male. I mean, I don't want to say this, but you need to impregnate people. Now obviously that could be done with technology. I understand it doesn't have to be, but it's going to get pretty grotesque pretty quickly. And to think that wouldn't be done, that the necessary measures wouldn't be taken, and this is just because we're not fulfilling what we naturally should be doing given God's economy.
Taiwan tried this. They tried to incentivize people to have more children, giving them 6 months of paid paternal leave.
Yeah.
And it still failed.
I think it's the same thing in Hungary. What's his name? Orban's Hungary. They're trying to do everything they can to subsidize 2 or more families to have 2 or more, and just people aren't doing it. It really is a social selfishness. But it's going to have incredible ramifications. Go ahead, Logan.
Well, but this is this is the last point for me, and I guess make it the most scary version of the situation, and then kind of roll it back to the topic. But no, in the Trump-Vance debate, not Trump-Vance, the Vance-Walz debate, they're like, oh, the Republican Party, because they're against abortion, they're trying to get into the bedroom. And it's like, well, just the general view of the government getting into your bedroom, so to speak. It's like, if the population goes where it's going and it comes down to a question of having kids or the dissolution of a government, the government's going to clamp down hard. And the question is, how is it going to do that? It's probably going to do that through artificial wombs. This is what it's going to do. And then you now have a government that has the power over life and death. That is not a government that you want. And so you're going to push to a government that will become this sort of all-encompassing organism. Sure, it won't be in your bedroom, but it will definitely tell you whether or not you come to be, and then will also tell you when your time is over, because it is no longer within its best interest to keep you alive because of the shrinking and collapsing economy.
It'll be worse. It'll be worse than being in your bedroom.
Exactly. It'll be worse than them
really
saying you can't kill your kid. Yeah, exactly. And this is where it gets.
No, it'll be early euthanasia. You're right.
Yeah. And yeah, your bedroom will just be in a hospital bed as you pass away under, maybe if they put you to sleep first. But to the main point of the conversation, though, is the religious part. And this is why I wanted to get to it. Is like, we're at a situation where our religious institutions are totally incompetent. And sure, in some ways, the government has infringed upon that and they've taken those powers away. But then, like, I would probably say, especially against a representative kind of government, a lot of this power has either been handed to the government by the church, or just through the church saying, like, oh, well, we don't want to be in politics, like totally giving up its stewardship mandate. Well, okay, if you're not going to be good stewards and use the institutions that have been given to you in the founding documents of the country, then someone else is going to rule. That's just how life works. If you're not going to represent yourself, then someone else is going to. And then they get all hurt over the fact that it doesn't go their way. Like, oh, non-Christians are not governing like Christians. Well, yes, this is like the most obvious thing you could imagine. Like, we have a hard time having Christians govern like Christians, let alone telling Christians don't go into government and then getting upset that they don't govern like Christians. It's like, oh my gosh, like, do we even hear ourselves anymore?